Life was predictable, calm, and ordinary, until it wasn't. I had been married to Claire for 12 years. We had a comfortable home, a dog named Max, and a routine we rarely strayed from. It wasn't thrilling, but it was steady. Then came the call. It was late on a Tuesday evening. Claire was out at her book club, or so I thought when my phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar. "Hello," I answered, expecting a telemarketer or a wrong number. "Is this Jacob?" The voice on the other end was hesitant but urgent. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Ryan. Hey, I don't know how to say this, but I thought you should know. Claire isn't where she says she is tonight." Time seemed to stop. "What are you talking about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I can't explain everything right now, but I've seen her with someone else." "I thought you deserved to know." I hung up, heart racing. The room spun as questions swirled in my mind. Was this a cruel prank? A mistake? Or was there something I'd missed in the quiet rhythm of our marriage? When Claire returned later that night, I didn't confront her. Instead, I studied her carefully. The way she smiled, the casual way she hung her coat. Was this the same woman I thought I knew so well? That one phone call planted a seed of doubt that would grow into something far greater than I could have imagined. The days following the call were a blur of uncertainty. I couldn't stop replaying Ryan's words in my mind. She isn't where she says she is. Was he mistaken? Or was there something hidden beneath the surface of our lives? Claire carried on as if nothing had changed. She still made coffee in the mornings, laughed at my jokes, and hummed while she cooked. But for the first time, I began noticing small cracks, moments that had previously gone unnoticed but now felt suspicious. Her phone, once left casually on the counter, was suddenly always with her. The late-night book club meetings seemed more frequent. And then there were the glances, those fleeting moments when she seemed distracted, lost in thought. I couldn't bring myself to confront her yet. Instead, I tried to focus on our life together, hoping the doubts would fade. But then Ryan called again. "I know this is hard," he said, his voice apologetic. "But I saw her again last night. She was at the cafe on 5th Street. Definitely not at any book club." His words hit like a punch to the gut. A part of me still wanted to believe this was all some misunderstanding, but another part couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in my chest. That night, I decided to take matters into my own hands. If there was something going on, I needed to know the truth. I didn't want to doubt Claire, but I couldn't keep living in the shadows of uncertainty. The next evening, Claire left for her usual book club meeting. This time, instead of staying home, I grabbed my jacket and decided to follow her. I didn't want to do this. It felt invasive, but the weight of doubt had grown too heavy to ignore. As her car pulled out of the driveway, I kept a safe distance. My heart raced with every turn she took. I told myself I was prepared for anything, but deep down, I wasn't sure I could handle what I might find. After a 15-minute drive, Claire's car slowed and parked in front of a small cafe. It was the same place Ryan had mentioned. I parked across the street, watching as she stepped inside. She wasn't alone. Through the window, I could see Claire sitting with a man I didn't recognize. They leaned in close, their conversation animated. She smiled at him, a smile I thought was reserved for me. I stayed in the car, frozen. My mind raced with questions. Who was he? What were they talking about? Was this just a friendly meeting or something more? I wanted to storm inside and demand answers, but I knew that wouldn't solve anything. Instead, I snapped a picture with my phone, proof of what I'd seen, and drove home in silence. When Claire returned later that night, she was cheerful, even affectionate. "How was book club?" I asked casually, masking the turmoil beneath the surface. "It was great," she replied without hesitation, unpacking her bag. "We're reading a new mystery novel. I think you'd like it." Her lie cut deeper than I expected. I didn't confront her then. I needed more time to process, to plan my next step. But one thing was clear. My trust had been shaken, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. The weight of Claire's lie hung over me like a dark cloud. Days turned into restless nights, and every interaction with her felt like a performance. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I also couldn't let this go unanswered. One evening, I decided it was time to confront her. I waited until after dinner, when we were sitting in the living room. "Claire," I started, my voice steady but firm, "can we talk?" She looked up from her book, her expression curious but unconcerned. "Course. What's on your mind?" I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "I've noticed some things lately that don't add up. Like your book club meetings. Are you sure there's nothing you're not telling me?" Her face changed, subtle but noticeable. A flicker of surprise, maybe even guilt, crossed her features before she composed herself. "What do you mean?" she asked, her tone guarded. I reached for my phone and showed her the picture I had taken at the cafe. "I followed you last week. I saw you meeting with someone. That doesn't look like a book club." Claire's face went pale. She stared at the photo, her hands trembling slightly. "Jacob, I can explain." "Then explain," I interrupted, my voice sharper than I intended. "Because right now, it looks like you've been lying to me." She hesitated, as if searching for the right words. "His name is Daniel. He's an old friend from college. We ran into each other a few months ago and we've been catching up. That's all it is, I swear." I wanted to believe her, but the doubt lingered. If it's just an old friend, why lie about it? "Why didn't you tell me the truth?" She looked down, tears forming in her eyes. "Because I didn't think you'd understand. I didn't want you to feel threatened or think it was anything more than friendship." Her explanation made sense, but the secrecy still stung. "Do you know how this looks, Claire? How it feels to be left in the dark?" She nodded, wiping her eyes. "You're right. I should have told you. I'm so sorry, Jacob. I never meant to hurt you." Her apology was sincere, but the damage had been done. Trust, once broken, is not easily repaired. That night we sat together in silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts. For the first time in our marriage, the foundation we'd built felt unsteady, and I wasn't sure if it could be restored. The days after our confrontation were heavy with tension. Claire tried to reassure me, but her words felt hollow against the silence that had settled between us. I wanted to believe her, to trust that her meeting with Daniel was innocent, but the secrecy still gnawed at me. Then, one afternoon I got another call from Ryan. "Jacob, I don't mean to intrude," he said, his tone cautious, but I saw Claire again. This time at the park. She was with the same guy. The park. Claire hadn't mentioned any plans that day. My chest tightened as I thanked Ryan and hung up the phone. That evening, I decided it was time to have another conversation with Claire. This time, no room for half-truths or excuses. "Claire, I need you to be completely honest with me," I said as we sat across from each other at the kitchen table. "What's really going on with Daniel?" Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she looked like she might deny everything again. But then, she sighed deeply and folded her hands in her lap. "Jacob, I've been meeting with Daniel because I've been feeling lost. It's not about him. It's about me," she admitted, her voice trembling. "Lost?" I asked, confused but willing to listen. She nodded. "Lately I've felt like I've been living on autopilot, like I'm just going through the motions. When I ran into Daniel, it was like a reminder of who I used to be before. Before everything became so routine." Her words cut deep, but they weren't entirely surprising. I had noticed her growing distant over the past year, but had chalked it up to stress or life's inevitable ebb and flow. "And you couldn't talk to me about this?" I asked, my voice softer now. "I was afraid," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Afraid you'd think I was ungrateful, or that I didn't love you anymore. But that's not it, Jacob. I do love you. I just didn't know how to explain what I was feeling." Her confession was raw and honest, and for the first time, I saw the weight she had been carrying. It wasn't about betrayal. It was about searching for something she felt she had lost within herself. "I wish you'd trusted me enough to share this sooner," I said, reaching for her hand. "We could have faced it together." "I know," she whispered. "And I want to fix this. I want us to fix this." Her vulnerability was real, and though my trust had been shaken, I could see she was trying. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Months later, Claire and I sat on our porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. It had been a turbulent journey, but the peace we now felt was hard-earned. Looking back, I realized the turning point wasn't just Claire's confession or our late-night conversations. It was the choice we both made, to face the cracks in our marriage instead of running from them. Claire's growth was evident. She had started therapy to work through her feelings of being lost, and even encouraged me to join her for a few sessions. Those sessions were difficult but transformative, giving us tools to communicate better and understand each other on a deeper level. One evening, Claire surprised me with something that left me speechless. An anniversary album she had created. Inside were photos, handwritten notes, and little mementos from our 12 years together. On the last page she wrote, "Jacob, thank you for not giving up on us. I've learned that love isn't about avoiding mistakes but about choosing to grow from them. I'm grateful every day for you and the life we're rebuilding together." Her words brought tears to my eyes. For the first time in a long time I felt not just love but a renewed sense of partnership. As for me, I learned to let go of my pride and embrace vulnerability. Claire wasn't the only one who had grown, I had too. I realized that trust isn't just something given. It's something rebuilt, brick by brick, with time and effort. Our marriage wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was real and it was stronger than before. We both knew there would be challenges ahead, but we also knew we could face them together. As the last rays of sunlight faded, Claire reached for my hand. "Thank you for staying," she said softly. I squeezed her hand and smiled. "Thank you for fighting for us." In that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not just for the woman sitting beside me, but for the journey that had brought us here. Because sometimes it's not the smooth paths that define a relationship. It's the storms you weather together and the decision to keep moving forward, hand in hand.